The snowstorm hit like a warning and a threat at the same time. The kind of storm that turns familiar roads into white deserts, where headlights barely penetrate the swirling chaos, and the wind howls like it's speaking a language only broken hearts understand. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, staring through the windshield at the world dissolving into nothing but flurries. And still, I drove. 200 miles. No sleep. No food. Just me, my mother's name echoing in my mind, and the gnawing sense that something terrible had already happened. I hadn't seen her in over a year, not since the fight that shattered everything. She had always been a complicated woman, fierce but fragile, strong yet reckless in ways that drove me mad. I had left home after another argument, my pride too thick to let me swallow my anger. But tonight, after a cryptic voicemail from a stranger at 3 a.m, I knew I couldn't ignore it. The message had been short, trembling with urgency. She's alone. Outside. Please hurry. My chest tightened as I remembered the last time I had heard her voice clearly, before her words got lost in the blur of our mutual resentment. I had imagined her in her warm kitchen, maybe sipping tea, maybe scolding me like always, but never like this. I had never imagined seeing her shivering alone, helpless in the teeth of a merciless storm. The highway was nearly invisible, slick with ice beneath the snow that coated everything. I had no choice but to drive slow, my headlights casting ghostly shadows on the frozen trees that lined the road. I passed abandoned trucks and cars stuck in drifts, their drivers waving uselessly as I passed. Each mile felt like a punishment, a reminder of all the years I hadn't spent with her, all the fights I could have avoided, all the apologies I had swallowed in my pride. I thought about Dad, who had disappeared from our lives long ago, leaving a void that Mom tried desperately to fill. She had fought for us in ways I only understood now, as an adult with scars of my own. She had endured betrayals, heartbreaks, the kind of struggles no one should have to face alone. And here I was, running into a snowstorm like a fool, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't. Hours passed. The storm didn't let up, it only worsened. Visibility dropped to near zero, and I had to slow down even more. My hands ached, my back throbbed, and fatigue pressed on me like a weight I couldn't shake. But every time I felt like giving up, I whispered her name to myself, over and over, like a prayer, like a lifeline. Mom, please. Then I saw it, a dim glow through the snow, flickering like a candle against the dark night. I squinted, praying it wasn't another abandoned car. As I drew closer, my heart lurched. There she was, standing outside a gas station, her small frame wrapped in a thin coat, her hair plastered to her face by the wind, her hands trembling. She looked like she had been waiting for something, or someone for far too long. I slammed the brakes, my car fishtailing slightly on the ice, and jumped out, my boots crunching through the snow. The cold hit me instantly, biting through layers of clothing, but I barely noticed. My eyes were locked on her, and all my anger, all my pride, dissolved into fear and relief. Mom, I shouted, running toward her. Her head lifted slowly, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her eyes were wide with confusion and something else I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe, or shame. She tried to speak, but the wind swallowed her words. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her small, trembling body against me. I'm here, I whispered, pressing my face to the crown of her head. I found you. I'm not letting you go. Her body sagged into mine, exhausted and trembling, and I realized how long she had been standing there. How long she had been alone. How many times she had survived life storms without anyone to lean on. And now, for the first time in years, she had me. I helped her into the car, fighting to keep my hands from shaking as I started the engine and cranked the heater. The warmth spread slowly, seeping into her frozen bones. She sat there quietly, her gaze fixed on the windshield, her lips pressed into a thin line. I wanted to ask 100 questions, scream at her for disappearing, for being so reckless, but I couldn't. Not yet. I just needed to make sure she was safe. As the car moved again, inching back onto the highway, the storm seemed even more relentless than before. Snow pelted the windshield in sheets, and I had to keep my focus razor-sharp to avoid sliding off the road. But through the chaos, I felt a strange calm, a connection that I hadn't felt in years. She was here. I had found her. That was enough for now. And then she spoke. "I didn't want you to find me." Her voice was soft, almost broken, and it pierced me in ways I hadn't expected. I glanced at her, searching for anger, for guilt, for explanation, but saw only a hollow exhaustion that made my chest ache. "Why, Mom? Why would you?" I stopped. I didn't know if I could ask the questions, not yet. But she didn't need me to. The answers were written in the lines of her face, in the way she stared out the window at the storm. She had secrets, pain I hadn't seen, decisions I would never fully understand. And one thing was certain, whatever had led her to this moment, it wasn't simple. The storm raged on, the road ahead a blinding white nothingness. I gripped the wheel tighter, and Mom's hand brushed mine on the console, a silent acknowledgement. Something was coming, something I couldn't yet see, but I knew it would change everything. And then, just as relief began to settle in, a shadow appeared on the road ahead. Something dark and unmoving. I slammed the brakes, the car sliding dangerously, and my heart skipped a beat. What, or who, was waiting for us in the storm? The shadow on the road loomed larger as the storm intensified, a dark, sinister shape that refused to give way. I barely had time to react before the tires skidded on the ice, my heart pounding so violently it drowned out the wail of the wind. Instinct took over. I twisted the wheel, narrowly avoiding a collision, and the car slid sideways before regaining traction. My mother's gasp pierced the frozen air, sharp and fragile. "I'm fine," I shouted over the storm, more to reassure myself than her. Her hands gripped my arm, trembling so hard that I could feel it through my coat. I glanced at her face, pale, almost translucent in the dim light, her eyes wide, filled with unspoken terror. And in that moment, I realized how little I truly knew her, how little I had ever known. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, almost inaudible. The words were laced with pain, and I realized she wasn't just scared of the storm. She was afraid of me finding her, afraid of facing the truths that had pushed her to this point. I wanted to ask what had happened, why she was out here in the middle of a blizzard, but her silence said more than any explanation ever could. We drove on, the car inching forward like a fragile lifeboat in a frozen ocean. The heater fought desperately to warm the cabin, but the cold had seeped into her bones and mine alike. My fingers ached around the steering wheel, my knuckles cracked, but I refused to let go.
Not now.
Not when she was so close to me, so terrifyingly vulnerable. Then came the gas station. Or what remained of it. The structure looked abandoned, windows cracked, doors hanging loosely on their hinges. And yet, there was movement. A figure crouched near the pumps, shrouded in shadow. I slowed, squinting through the swirling snow. The closer I got, the more familiar the figure seemed, until my breath caught in my throat. It was him, her ex-husband, the man whose name had been whispered in our fights, whose betrayal had broken her in ways I had never fully understood. The man who had left her with nothing but memories of deceit and heartbreak. And now he was standing there in the middle of the storm, watching, waiting. I slammed the car into park, heart hammering. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. For the first time, fear gave way to recognition, and the look she gave me was one I would never forget, raw, haunted, and laced with fury. He's dangerous," she murmured. "I didn't want you to see this." "Dangerous? Mom, what are you talking about?" I demanded, stepping out of the car despite the biting wind. Snow whipped my face, stinging my cheeks, but I ignored it. My mother's safety was all that mattered. She shook her head, turning away from the approaching figure. It's not safe. You shouldn't." But I wasn't listening. My eyes were fixed on him, the man who had stolen pieces of her soul and left scars invisible to everyone else. He looked older, more worn than I remembered, but no less threatening. There was something in his posture, the way he stood in the storm, that made my stomach twist. He wasn't just waiting. He was hunting. The air between us crackled with tension. The snow fell heavier, thicker, as if the storm itself had decided to punish us for daring to be here. I took a step closer to Mom, wrapping my arm around her shoulder. "We're leaving," I said firmly. "Right now. No matter what." She hesitated, her lips pressed together, before nodding slightly. Together, we moved back toward the car, every nerve on edge. But before we could reach it, he spoke. His voice was low, chillingly calm. "You shouldn't have come," he said, almost a whisper over the wind. "She's mine now." My blood ran cold.
Mine?
"Mom, what are you talking about?" But she didn't answer. Her face was pale, her eyes darting between me and him. Something terrible had happened here. Something I wasn't prepared for. And then he stepped forward. I felt a surge of protective anger, something primal that I hadn't known existed. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice slicing through the howl of the storm. My hand went to the car door, searching for anything I could use. But it was useless.
He wasn't stopping.
Mom grabbed my hand suddenly, her grip iron-strong despite her frailty. "Listen to me," she said, her voice urgent, trembling. I can't. Her words were cut off by a sudden gust of wind, stronger than any before, pushing snow into our faces. And in that moment, I realized just how alone we were. The storm wasn't just a backdrop. It was a force, trapping us in this frozen confrontation, exposing truths I had never been ready to face. The man moved closer, and for the first time, I noticed the bag in his hand. Something heavy, dark, and foreboding. My heart raced, my mind screamed, but I couldn't move. I couldn't let him touch her. Not after everything she had endured. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Tell me everything.
Now."
She swallowed hard, shaking. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could handle it. But he knows things. Things about us, about me, about everything. He wants control. He's been following me for weeks." The wind gusted again, and he took another step forward, bag in hand, eyes cold, unyielding. Time slowed. The snow fell like frozen needles against our faces. I felt every heartbeat, every shiver, every thought crashing at once. And I knew there was no turning back. I had found her. I had driven through a storm, risked everything. And now, in the middle of this frozen hell, I realized that finding her was only the beginning. The real fight, the one that would test every ounce of strength, every bit of courage I had, was about to begin. And then he raised the bag. The man raised the bag higher, and I saw the glint of metal through the torn fabric. My heart lurched. Every instinct screamed to protect my mother, to shield her from the storm and from him. The wind tore at our faces, snow slicing into our eyes, yet time slowed, crystallized into a single moment where nothing else mattered but survival and the truth. "Stop," I shouted, stepping in front of Mom. "Back off." His gaze flicked to her, then back to me, calculating, cold. "You don't understand," he said, his voice calm but dangerous. "She belongs to this.
She owes me.
She can't just run." My chest tightened. I had suspected some unfinished business, some shadow from Mom's past, but hearing it now made my stomach twist with anger and fear.
"No."
"She belongs to herself," I spat, my voice sharp, echoing over the storm. "And I'll make sure of it." Mom gripped my arm, whispering urgently. "Listen to me, Ollie, he can't. He doesn't have the power he thinks he does. You have to stay calm. Just let me handle this." I stared at her, stunned. Mom, always the fighter, the survivor of countless betrayals, was telling me to let her take charge. Her voice, though trembling, carried authority, the kind that could move mountains. She had spent years preparing for this moment, for whatever demons had followed her here. And suddenly, I understood. The woman I had driven through a blizzard to find wasn't helpless. She was formidable, even in the frostbitten night. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, her small frame trembling but resolute. "Enough," she said. "This ends tonight. Whatever you think you're owed, whatever control you believe you have, it's over." He laughed, a low, cruel sound that cut through the storm. "You're bluffing," he said. "You can't do this alone." "You're right," she said softly, almost casually, and my blood froze. For a moment, I thought she was defeated. Then she raised her hand, and out of her coat, she revealed a small but powerful taser. My eyes widened. She had prepared for this. All along, she had been ready. Before he could react, she moved like lightning, pressing the taser against his arm. The electricity crackled, and he yelped, stumbling back in shock. Snow sprayed from his boots as he lost his footing, his menacing aura shattered in an instant. I stood frozen, half in disbelief, half in awe. Mom turned to me, eyes fierce. "Get inside the car."
Now.
I obeyed immediately, slamming the door behind me. She followed a second later, and we locked ourselves in, the heater blasting warmth into our frozen bones. Outside, the storm continued, but inside, there was clarity. Mom sat back, her chest heaving, her eyes still blazing with courage. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't want you to see this. I thought I could protect you by staying away." I reached out, taking her hand. "You don't have to protect me alone anymore," I said. "I'm here. I'll fight with you." She smiled, a weary but genuine smile. "You always have, Ollie. You just didn't know it until tonight." We sat there for a moment, the wind howling outside, the snowstorm masking the world in white, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger I had carried toward her for years, the resentment, the pride, the distance, it all melted away. What mattered was survival, courage, and the bond we had rediscovered in the frozen night. Hours passed. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but inside that small car, we planned our next move. We would report him. We would reclaim the power he tried to wield over our lives. And above all, we would no longer let fear dictate our choices. When morning finally broke, the snow had turned to slush, the world a muted gray, but the danger had not disappeared entirely. We cautiously stepped out, Mom's arm around mine, each of us steady, resolute. The gas station looked desolate, abandoned in the daylight, but the memory of last night's terror lingered like a shadow. I glanced at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I saw her not as the fragile, shivering woman outside a gas station, but as the fierce, unstoppable force she had always been. Her strength had survived storms, betrayal, and heartbreak, and tonight, it had saved us both. "Are you okay?" I asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. She nodded, a slow, measured nod. "I will be. And so will you. We survived. That's what matters." I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I've missed so much. I'm sorry for leaving, for being angry." Her smile was bittersweet. "We both have regrets, Ollie. But tonight we have each other. And that's enough to start over." We drove away from the gas station, leaving the shadow of the storm and the man who had tried to control us behind. The road was slick, the snow still falling in patches, but the weight that had been pressing on me for years began to lift. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Not just because we had survived the storm, but because I had witnessed my mother's strength, and in doing so, discovered my own. Life was still complicated, messy, and uncertain. There were fights to reconcile, apologies to offer, truths to confront. But there was also courage, empowerment, and love, the kind that no blizzard, betrayal, or shadow from the past could ever take away. As we drove through the thawing landscape, I realized that this journey, this freezing, terrifying, emotional odyssey, wasn't just about finding my mother. It was about finding the pieces of myself that had been lost, too. About learning that bravery isn't just about facing the storm outside. It's about facing the storms inside, too. And in that quiet, snowy morning, I knew one undeniable truth. No matter what life threw at us next, we would face it together. Unbroken.
Fierce. Free.
The road stretched ahead, endless and glimmering under the pale winter sun, and I finally let myself breathe. For the first time in years, I felt the warmth of hope returning, not just for Mom, but for both of us. The storm was over, but our story, our real, messy, beautiful story, was just beginning.